don't want to miss this one for sure.
All righty. I believe I am recording. Good deal. Nice reminder.
Oh, on the 20th, yay. Guess who we have? Ryan Ripley. Applying flow and Kanban. He's going to do, this is new to me. I wasn't sure what he was going to talk about. So he's going to do applying flow and Kanban. That's so cool. So yay, we have Ryan Ripley for October 20th.
And that's posted out on the website, so everyone can start registering for that. If they want to go out to the website now, they can register for that one.
You can register up because that one this one filled up
Quickly.
way over more than what we normally have. So, and I think Ripley's probably will too. So please go register as you can if you'd like to come.
Absolutely.
Oh, and I am a student of Dr. Chuck. And so I'm very pleased that he's here tonight. I'm super excited. He's going to go over how to avoid managing your agile project into a corner. And I don't want to take any time away from him, so I will keep it short and say thank you so much for coming. And here is Dr. Chuck.
That's it. We're ready to go.
We're ready to go.
We are super excited to have you, Dr. Chuck. I'm going to stop sharing, and you should be able to share.
All right, let me tell you where this is coming from, folks. First of all, as we're going through this, if you want to ask questions, by all means, go right ahead. I'll give you a little Zoom magic here. If you put yourself on mute and then you use the space bar, you press it down, it takes you off mute while your hand on the space bar. You put your hand back up, it goes back onto mute. I don't know if you knew that. So I've earned my money for the day. Remember, this is a volunteer session too. So I'm going to share my slides here, but before I go into that, one of the problems I've noticed, I've seen a lot of companies, I do a lot of coaching and a lot of training, and I've seen a lot of companies use this agile approach. And when they align the work, they're not aligning the work in a way that allows them to make something that's small and releasable. It's like each sprint cascades into the next. And it doesn't seem like they're doing it, that kind of a problem, until you start to get into the details. So I took some of the ideas I've seen with other companies I've worked with, said, you know, I think other people ought to hear about this too, so that you too don't run into these issues. I got a big problem with minimal viable product because minimal viable product usually ends up being maximal amount of work that I can fit in a certain amount of time. So I'm going to show you some ways to slice and dice your product backlog, so that you don't put yourself into a situation where you have cascading dependencies. So let me fire this puppy up and then share this. So just a little bit about me. There's me. Yes, that is me. Back when I had less facial hair. And that is me now.
Resemblance there.
So I'm a Scrum trainer through Scrum.org. I do a lot of product owner training. In fact, I'm the steward now on the product owner course. So I'm one of the people that help curate the material. I used to be a developer. I still like developing. Got a doctorate in computer science because I love computer science. And I like to talk to people about strategy. And as far as a CAT goes, I'm a Cucumber approved trainer. So I do a lot of test-driven development work too.
Can I plug your PSPO course, Dr. Chuck? Because I will tell you, for any of you guys who have taken a product owner course from Scrum Alliance, good course, don't get me wrong, great place to start, but Scrum.org takes the product owner course to a whole new level. And we really have Dr. Chuck to thank for that, quite honestly. It takes it to a whole new level. A lot of the things that are not talked about in a Scrum Alliance course are things like how the product owner role relates to product management as a whole. And that is exactly what you will get if you take a PSPO course. So if you have a CSPO from Scrum Alliance, do not think it's a duplicate certification by any means. Go out and get a PSPO as well. You will not regret it.
And I will just throw in that I can attest to that because I am a student of Dr. Chuck's class. For PSPO. It was so many years ago.
You know?
Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you there, but that just needed to be said. So,
But I do have to say, Scrum Alliance people who do the CST, CSPO, CSM,
mhm,
they're good folks. They know what they're talking about. It's
absolutely.
just a different philosophy.
Mhm.
And guess what I'm doing tomorrow? Teaching a product owner course on Pacific time. Goodness gracious. So I picked out this one idea that this one group I'm working with. They're doing a change to a different type of CRM system, an Oracle system. And the way it's laid out is they got customer management, order management, product management, opportunity to quote. Those are different modules. And they're trying to move to this particular product. And I'm just showing you this to say how complicated this puppy is. Moving different parts. There's how they do a sales lead. They qualify the lead. They create an opportunity. They create an order, create an account, etc. So let's do a work breakdown structure. We got customers. We got to convert our old customers to the new system, convert our old products to the new system, convert the orders that exist, convert opportunities for sales, and then integrate this whole thing with the current order system so it spits out a bill of material and orders the product. Great way to do it. So in order to convert the customers, we got to analyze new customers, create some sort of a mapping between the old system and the new system, create some sort of a load program, and then load the customers, make sure they're okay and fix any problems. I mean, management 101. You probably got to do the same thing with products, orders, any sales opportunities. So I can just map that whole thing across, and there's my work breakdown structure. And don't forget, we should determine integration points with the current systems, create integration, test everything, and to complicate things up even a little bit more, we need to have some system tests, some UAT tests, make sure to fix errors, some sort of phased rollout, and then go into maintenance and support. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? I hope so. You good with that, Jennifer? Okay. There's nobody else to point to, so you're right.
I am.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add teams. We're going to do it the good old-fashioned way. We're going to make our BAs analyze the customers, analyze the product, analyze the orders, analyze the needs. They're going to do all that work. We're going to take our systems analysts and take what the BAs give them and create some mappings. Then the devs are going to create some sort of a load program and load the customers. Then we're going to hand it over to QA to make sure that all that stuff was loaded. And then the system QA. Then finally to the ops group who phase rolls it out, and back to dev for some maintenance. Sounds about right in a more traditional approach, doesn't it? These teams are based on pools of skills, non-cross-functional teams. We're not doing Agile yet. We're just kind of showing one way to do it. Here's the problem. Handoffs, cascading handoffs. The business analysts hand it to the SAs, hand it to dev, hand it to QA, hand it to SQA. If any one of those groups is a little bit late, all of them are going to be late, particularly some of the earlier groups. And who gets stuck with the problems? We just cut QA, right? So we're going to do Agile. We're Agile. We're going to make cross-functional teams. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to create a team that converts the customers. It's got BAs, SAs, the whole schlemiel. One that converts products, one that converts orders, one that converts opportunities. And finally, an integration team. And then we'll still kind of hand it off to the QA people and the operations folks and the dev folks. We've got cross-functional teams. They're doing their little piece of the product. Cool. This is where problems occur that people don't easily recognize. Team 1 feeds their work into Team 2, which feeds it into Team 3, which feeds it into Team 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let me go back a slide and show you what I mean. So you can't really do too much with products or orders until you convert all the customers. So if Team 1 is late, it's going to push out Team 2, Team 3. And if we spend some time gold plating, or not even that, not doing something minimal for customers, we might end up with nothing until quite a ways down the end. So that's not the best way to group the teams. Those dependencies occur. So the problem is not that we don't have cross-functional teams, that we don't have product backlogs, and that we're not doing some sort of agile development. It's the way the work is laid out. We need to slice it by business scenario, not technical aspects of the system. Let me show you what I mean. Back to converting customers. There's the steps for converting a customer. Let me change the way it lays out. We'll kind of move it across the bottom. Then, when we convert a customer, we're going to make business scenarios. Load the simplest customer, like a customer with only one address and one person that works there. Load a slightly less simple customer, like maybe a customer that has a few people working there in a couple locations. Load a more typical customer. Load a more international customer that has odd addresses. Load compound customers that have different divisions. Now load more complicated customers. So what we're doing with each one of these green lines is looking at ways to start with something super, super simple, go back and add more complication, add more complication, add more complication. You with me, Jennifer? Okay, you're my feedback. My
I am.
command mind there. So I'm going to lay it out like this. So in order to load the simplest customer, I got to look at their needs, do the mapping, do that stuff. So each one of these business scenarios still has to go through those tasks. I'm going to propagate it now. There's the customers, products, orders, opportunities, integration. Each one of those has some of those technical steps to move through it, to slice down the work.
Pretty. I get happy when I see boxes that are titrated off of each other rather than rather than boxes that appear to be handover, right? That's not what's happening here. So that's good.
What I'm trying to do, and I've worked with this with a lot of companies, is they look at things in a big picture, and it's like in order to be able to divide it up into the right size, you might have to atomize everything in little pieces and then recombine it in a different way, which is what I do in this next slide. So my simple epic consists of loading a simple customer, doing a simple product, simple orders, simple opportunity, and some sort of little integration. And then some sort of test if I can, and error correction. Here's the pushback you get on something like this though. Well, we got to go back and reopen it up and do the same thing over. Yes, you do. But if we divide it up like this, we might get to the point, oh shoot, you can't annotate here either. But you might get to the point where down on compound 2 epic or even complicated epic, maybe you've got enough product there that you can release it at that point. In fact, that simple epic with simple customers, maybe we can release some of that to a customer to say, take a look at how it's working for these couple customers. How are you going to use it? Is there something that's missing? So what we're ending up with is dividing across this way, grouping those different pieces of conversion into something that's an evolution of the product. So let me press on to the next one here. For example, here might be a way to look at a super simple epic. We got our simple epic, create a super simple order. That might be the story that falls into that epic. A super simple story, or hard to say. It's late in the day for me too, you know that? A super simple order. Maybe it's a customer with one address, a product with only one thing in it, no bill of materials, one color, one size, and some sort of an order that's prepaid so you don't have to worry about bank connections. and it's pulled right into your system with no errors. It's like the super simplest thing you could pull into your system. That's a reasonable business scenario. Nobody's going to buy that, a product that does just that. But from that particular scenario, now you're learning a lot of different things about creating an order, converting all those different pieces. So maybe you start to propagate that into a less simple order that touches customers, products, orders, opportunities, and some integration. So that's enough for that drawing right now. I'm going to go back to something and share a few more drawings. I can't be done this quick, so I don't expect to really. So let me do a little bit of drawing here. I got mural up because I couldn't figure out another kind of whiteboard to do real quick. Marcy, you're gonna be my canary here.
Can do.
All right. I want to make a pizza ordering app for my iPhone, and I want it to be the simplest pizza ordering app I can make, and it's for Joe's Pizza Shop. What functionality are you going to put onto that?
Well, the first thing you're probably going to need to do is sign on and select a pizza. The most simple thing, right? If I have, let's say you just sell 5 pizzas, you can't customize the order, and I just want to select one pizza out of the 5 and place an order, right?
It didn't occur what I expected it to. Okay, I'll redraw that. That's okay. Okay, I want to do something simpler. If I just sign on, that's a lot of work, isn't it?
I agree. I just want to go to the website. Yeah, the app,
Okay.
download the app, whatever it is. I don't like it when I have to create a sign on to order a pizza.
How about this? How about an app that you press the button and it orders a medium cheese pizza? That's all.
That'll work. That works in our house.
Or maybe a medium pepperoni. That's the only option. You press the button. That's too complicated. I want something simpler.
Something more simple than signing on and ordering a medium cheese pizza, or not even signing on, just opening up the webpage, ordering a medium cheese pizza.
Let me give you a hint. How about, and nobody's going to buy this, how about some sort of an app that just has Joe's logo and phone number?
Oh. Call-in orders. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I haven't done it for so long.
Got a lot of automatic reorder, huh? So if I do something like that, Joe's logo and phone number, and don't even let the phone interact with clicking on the phone number and dialing the pizza shop, nobody's going to buy that. But it is a simple app. What are you going to learn from that? You're going to learn, first of all, what's Joe's phone number, what Joe is like to work with. How do you make an app on an iPhone? You got to get this Swift language. You got to get an emulator. You got to set up this whole environment for it. How do you test it? Well, that's not so easy either. What phones are you going to put it on? How about putting it on the App Store? Woo! Give you chills just thinking about the complexity of that. So even an app like that just mitigates the risk of learning stuff. That can help you quite a bit, I would say.
Freshly rolling off of a product owner class, I'm also thinking that you could do some research off of that even and just see how many hits you get to that app, right? And you at least know, hey, this is how many people are interested in Joe's Pizza.
Ooh, a fake. So what I'm trying to say, you guys are making fun of me on chat. Shame on you. So your next iteration through this might be now clicking on the button that calls Joe's Pizza Shop. That seems like a simple thing to do, but now you got to worry about how do you interact with the phone? There might be security in there. I don't know. So make sure somebody doesn't hack in and call Saudi Arabia when you click the Joe's Pizza Shop. What do you do when somebody's out of the country and they click that? I don't know. So thinking about those complications, that's the next iteration. By the time you get to the point where you have a button that does nothing but order a medium cheese pizza, think about all the things you have to learn. How to interact with the back end. How do you get a pizza order over to the order system? Things along those lines. So by the time you get to the point where you can pick cheese, pepperoni, and sizes and extra cheese and all sorts of stuff like that and pay for it on the phone, woo, that's a lot of complication. But each one of these iterations, while they might not be something that you actually sell to the customer, it's a way to think of the product as, how am I going to do something that's going to mitigate not just creating value, but mitigate the risk of the unknowns. Something really simple, so I can figure something out on it.
A simple add-on?
Starting to sound reasonable?
Yeah.
So let me give you an idea of, and here's why I dislike minimal viable product. If you can change your mind to say minimal inspectable increment, something that the customer is going to inspect and give you some sort of feedback. One of my other friends puts it a minimal value verification. That's a weird way of looking at it, but it seems to make sense when I think about it. Do you know how your customer is going to use that product? I got an idea, but it's not really felt out until the customer actually starts to use it. So let's see if I can draw this thing again. Yep, there we go. So we can look at something like this. Here's time, and here's value, and here's high value. So if we're doing a product creation, we're going to shoot for this value right here. And using an agile approach, we're trying to do high value stuff. And then we release it here. And we got some chocolatey goodness coming out. But if I can do this, if I can have a point release, at this point, then I can see how the customers are using that thing. And I can say, you know what? I thought they were going to use this piece of the system, but they're really using this thing. And I thought they were going to use this piece of product this way, but they're not. They're using it a different way. So you can do an inspection here and say, how's the customer really using the product? Maybe we should amp up the things that they're using and minimize the things that they're not and shoot toward another piece of value, which we can then have another point release, and maybe even shoot toward a higher level of value. How's the customer going to use the product? How they're going to use it's a real risk. And by having multiple releases like this, you can start to get an idea on how they're using it and mitigate that kind of a problem. So everybody else is kind of quiet. You guys okay?
Yep.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you've got questions or you have something to add.
If the question is too hard, I'll just ignore it. So.
Yeah, Chuck, Chad Manley here. So when you were talking about like kind of that point release, could that be maybe even synonymous for like a minimum marketable functionality as well? Or, you know, is it just kind of building upon maybe what would be considered minimum marketable functionality? Or?
And that's where I got to be careful of it. The reason I didn't say minimal marketable product or minimal viable product is because a lot of times companies hear that and it's like, that's version 1.0. We never move on to version 2.
Yeah.
So yes, you're thinking along the right lines, but really simplifying that puppy.
Right, yeah, and I think there's a distinction between calling something a minimum viable product and then also, saying we're going to release an MVP, right? And then beyond that, we're going to add enhancements, which might be your MMFs at that point, right?
Yep, yep. So good way to think of it.
My experience with doing this, Dr. Chuck, has been it's great if you have some customers that know that they're going to be your beta testers, and they can go out and really beta test the thing and give you good feedback. But I realize that that's not always an option. When I've done this in established companies where we had a good customer base, and we could partner with a customer and say, do you want to be our beta tester for this new feature? But if you're a completely brand new company with no established customers yet, how do you go out and test that? I guess, how do you release a test release like that, and without kind of ruining your brand name, is my question. Without people thinking, man, they put this out in the wild and it's trash.
So like you said, you probably have to establish a small group of folks.
Right.
Let me give you something to look at. I'm not going to show a video on it, but go out to YouTube. Nordstrom, there's a D in there, right? Nordstrom Innovation Labs. And on that particular video, some of the folks at Nordstrom went into a store, brought a bunch of computers, and developed a whole app within a week directly with customers as they were coming in. It was pretty neat. And they used paper prototypes, then put it on the iPad. So if you want to look for something cool, go Google that. That might lead to some thoughts on this. This particular idea, I've done it with a medical group that had a cadre of doctors who were reviewing a product. It wasn't life critical, but they were reviewing it knowing that there was more evolutions of it coming. So gathering that group of folks is helpful. If it's your first release, man, I don't know. We got 59 people that might be able to come up with a better answer. Pedro, you got the Nordstrom there in the video. Okay, cool. Thanks for the chat. So I want to show you another application that one of my friends built. This was her architecture. She was doing a search against a merge table that merged 3 different databases for the most part. And that was her screen. And here's how she approached it. I used color coding. So sprint 1. None of this existed before. She made the screen, looked ugly. She hard-coded these 3 search boxes. And then when results came back, she put it as XML here. So these are search boxes. This is the result. And she had the search go against this merge table. It was only a merge table of one database. So here's the key. She had everything laid out because everything was hard-coded. She knew what was coming back, what it should look like, and when she hit the search button, it came back and showed it as ugly old XML looking rough. That's one way to do it for a sprint. She wasn't about to release it, but that's the way that worked. She moved on to sprint number 2. And what she did was took one of the search boxes and made it a variable. So now, she added in another table to look at. So the results could be nothing, or the results could be more than one item. She wasn't quite sure what was going to come back because people could type stuff into this box. What she did was because there were more than one thing possibly coming back, and this is more complicated than this, but basically, she put a little scroll bar there, and she had a result box that said, nothing found. That was sprint number 2. Not releasable, ought not to put it in the hands of the customer, but she could inspect it. Sprint number 3. Running out of colors. Sprint 3. She took those hard-coded variables, those hard-coded search boxes, and let people type in anything. So they were all variable. And that was fairly easy to do. So she was able to add in a couple more merge tables. And she looked at this little thing here, this text box, and said, I don't like it. It should say, no result, nothing found. So at that point, she could probably release it. It still had an ugly result when it came back. It wasn't polished. But she was evolving it. I'll get into why in a moment. Sprint number 4. Boy, that was bad. So sprint number 4, she made the screen look better, made the results look better, kind of polished it up. What I'm trying to get to here is, here's how she could have looked at it. She could have said, sprint 1 is a screen. Sprint 2 is a database. Sprint 3 is tying them together. And then sprint 4 is polished. But by doing it this way, sprint 1, sprint 2, and sprint 3, all of those guys touched every level of the architecture. So each sprint, she learned something more about the architecture, evolved it, learned more about each layer, evolved it. If she would have done it just one sprint with a screen and the next one doing database, anything she learned from doing the screen would only marginally inform her on how to do the database. So she was mitigating the risk of making sure that something was inspectable every time, using like what they call a tracer bullet through the architecture, evolving the product here. All right. Now my question for you here is, I'm going to open this up to some questions or some thoughts on this. I'd love to have some ideas. This took less time than I thought it was going to take.
So Chuck, when you were talking about your inspection points, do you correlate those back to your sprint reviews if your teams are doing Scrum?
To a degree. Every sprint review should be an inspection of the product, the increment. It doesn't necessarily mean that it goes to a customer. So after several sprints, you might release something that's really rough to a customer that they can inspect. So in a way, it's related to that, but not directly. Did that answer your question okay?
I think so. So what you're looking at is in your system reviews, it's really geared towards your stakeholders. And once you feel that you have something that is to the point where customers can give you feedback, that's when you'd want to get your inspection point out there into your sample set of people.
Yes. But I also want to put a caveat in there. If you're doing continuous deployment, you can release multiple times in the sprint. So I guess the customers could look at your product, your existing product, multiple times during the sprint. That leads to an interesting question, man. If you release multiple times in the sprint, Then you come to the sprint review. What are you going to look at the sprint review? Why are you going to look at it? I got an answer for that. But it sounds weird, doesn't it? The sprint review is an opportunity to inspect what you're building, inspect that product, and here's my product, to make sure that I'm going in the right direction. It's inspecting the product for the purpose of adapting work that's coming up. And we keep work that's coming up in the product backlog. So it's like looking at this thing and saying, ooh, if I only had an orange tip on it, it would be easier to see. Oh, let's write that, put it in the product backlog. So that becomes somewhat disjoint or somewhat less dependent on having a product out in production. That's how people can do it with continuous deployment. Another thing I've seen with a lot of companies too is if you can start calling things experiments and make people feel more comfortable. And they say, we're going to try an experiment and see if it works or doesn't work. That way it's not a failure, it's just an experiment that didn't produce the results we thought. Yes, Quentin, that is kind of Kanban-ish. Yes. And somebody asked here too, this approach that I was showing it, is it a way to intentionally narrow the cone of uncertainty? I hadn't thought about it like that, but that's a reasonable thing. The uncertainty of how are people going to use it? Are we going to get the stuff out? Are we going to be able to produce something reasonable? Yes. You know, I want to draw one more drawing here. Can't help myself. So what I'm doing here, just so you guys know, I've got an iPad and I'm sharing a mural board because that pencil on an iPad is just killer.
You'll probably have to reshare your screen. There you go.
I'm going to. I can't draw with a mouse worth a darn. So here's one way to look at it.
I haven't tried this with my Microsoft Surface yet, but that's the whole reason why I got it. So I'm gonna have to try it.
So we got the scientific method. That's hypothesis. Then we do an experiment. Then we analyze the results. And then based on the results, we either extend or redo the hypothesis. If I liken that to a lean approach, it's kind of like that. We're coming up with a hypothesis. It's a darn good hypothesis. In fact, it's so good, it's going to be a plan. Then we'll go and experiment on it. You can liken that to the agile mindset. So this agile idea is not tomfoolery that somebody came up with Berkeley or something like that. It's based on scientific method applied to management. It's not craziness. I'm going to open up to some more questions here.
The biggest challenge I've seen with companies really applying empirical process has been, you know, just in their cultural tolerance of experimentation, right? I don't know. Have you had any success taking risk-adverse companies and really teaching them how valuable this is, and what were some of the key takeaways, you know, that really made them capture that, I guess is the question. Really made them realize this was worth doing, right?
As a matter of fact, I just got done working with a company. I'm still working with them, but a couple of weeks ago, they said their mindset has really shifted to this experimental mindset. Because, if you think about it, this agile approach actually mitigates a lot of risk. It puts control back into your hands.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like a traditional approach is more like archery. I got my arrow there. I'm going to shoot toward a target. Shoot, off it goes. If I aim right, it's going to hit what I expect it to. That's a more traditional approach. An agile approach is kind of like curling. I got the stone thing. I'm sliding on the ice. And as it goes toward the goal, people sweep the room. It's a lot more complicated than that. But you can adjust the direction either back to the goal or to a different goal. So sometimes people find that useful. And looking at it as a risk mitigation. I ask people all the time, when do you know the most about the actual schedule of a project? Hopefully they say at the end. When do you know the most about the actual requirements? Hopefully they say the end. Then you ask them, when do you lock down requirements and schedule, and then control it by change management? Forehead stopping moment. It would be better if, as we learn things, we feed that back in to our direction and take advantage of it, rather than try and get back onto a track that we laid out when we knew the least. Let's try and mitigate those risks together.
You
So
should
by
put that
doing
on
that-
t-shirts.
Say what?
You should put that on t-shirts.
I know, that's a great observation. There's a lot of companies that put a lot of effort into managing risk by controlling change, right? Rather than embracing the change and using that to inspect and adapt, right? So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I've seen that in a lot of companies. Anybody else have any questions? This is a really simple concept, but in my experience is it's really hard to apply, right? How many times are you guys in, sprints, let's just say refinement. You're refining your stories and you're trying to figure out how to slice them. And everybody wants to slice them. Everyone's got multiple different ways to slice them, right? And how do you decide which way is the best way to slice? I'm asking the crowd, right? That's where this technique really comes in handy, to know what's the experiment you're trying to prove, right? What's the hypothesis you're trying to prove, and slice your stories based on that, rather than what's the next minimal viable product you're going to release in 6 months from now, right? A lot of people will hold their stories until they've got 3 months worth to release or something like that, even if they're doing continuous delivery. Sometimes they'll slice it that way. So it makes you really think about how you're slicing your stories.
And there is too, there's not just business value, but there's a lot of value in minimizing the risk of learning stuff and not knowing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So don't always think, yeah, it's got to be something that somebody's going to, use to invest in stocks or something like that. So you're minimizing the risk of not knowing what comes next. It takes a while to get there. Actually, I gave this presentation a while ago and polished it since then, but it took over an hour for it, so went quicker today.
Anyone else have any questions? Can you go back to the slide that you were showing? There was the slide that you showed that showed how you ended up slicing the product differently in that first section, and you ended up showing simple and more complicated. There you go.
That one.
This is an approach I really try to drill into teams, but again, I find a lot of people don't think horizontally like this, right? We talk a lot about vertical slicing, or we talk a lot about vertical slicing and this and that, and people understand that vertical slicing means you're not doing front end and then development and then database and then testing or what have you. they understand that. But this type of slicing, where you're really taking the simplest scenario, and you're executing on that first, and then you're taking a little more complicated scenario and executing on that. And that this is one I often, I'll give you an example. I've got a team that just recently had to convert a bunch of a site from one SharePoint site to another. They had a whole bunch of files or something they were converting over to from one SharePoint site to another, and they didn't know what kind of loading issues they were going to run into. They really didn't know how this was going to go, right? They had tens of thousands of files they were moving, and they were going to slice them like alphabetically. Like we're going to go customers A through C, and then we're going to go customers D through F, and they were going to batch them like that. And I was really trying to get them to batch by file size or something like that, right? Take the smallest file sizes you have and batch those over, see what kind of loading issues you run into, because the concern was around loading issues and loading time and different things like that. Then, once you've batched the smaller ones, take, the next bigger ones and batch those, see if you run into loading issues, and continue to do that until you figure out, what the magic formula is for a smooth batch process, right? And it was funny because when I suggested it, the team kind of, they literally looked at me like I had 6 heads, right? So I don't know. I guess this resonates with some of us, and I'm curious if it resonates with some of you, or if it is just a completely novel concept to others, and you're struggling to understand when and where to apply it, I guess.
And if I could give you another example here too. One company I worked with recently, they're doing a migration of customer data over to a new system.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we got to do all our customer migration and then test it. It's like, are there some customers you don't have to migrate? Like customers that are inactive. Or maybe there's some customer out there that's in Kazakhstan who has a really weird address that is going to really make it hard to migrate them. Maybe you can just process them manually for the time being and still get the product out with those kind of edge cases for your scenarios. Or maybe even like this, a finance group is doing a migration to a new product too. And we talked about how to split this up. And it's like, well, maybe our release should be just our whale customers, the ones that spend a lot of money with us. And then we can go back and add some of those complications later. Those folks, we can handle it in the old system or kind of handle it manually in some different ways. So our minimal viable product, or marketable product maybe even, was not necessarily everything. It was the people who really mattered to us. And we let the other folks, I don't want to say slide, but they waited.
Good example.
One company I worked with who did this, another example here too, is they were making logistics, software for logistics for small airplanes. And they were trying to do it on an iPad. And their first iteration was, we're going to get one Cessna going to one location, carrying one passenger, and it's less than 100 miles or something like that. So they didn't have to worry about a lot of things, but they were able to make the logistics of when did they land, how much fuel to put on, how was going to fly, blah, 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 whatever other things they did. Then they started adding another complication, like what about 2 people on the plane? What about more than 2 people on the plane? What about not just a Cessna, but something that requires more maintenance when it lands? Now let's talk about multiple legs. Now let's talk about jets. So we started out with like something really simple. They might not even sell a lot of those kind of logistics. But that's where they started so that they could learn stuff to feed the next few iterations.
I saw Barb's got a comment on here that said it seems easier to do this when you're developing something new, but not as easy when you're making big changes to production systems.
No doubt about that. Big changes to production systems. I know that I worked for a telephone company a number of years ago, and they did kind of a release. They said we run 80% of our tests. The customers find the other 20% of the tests. But that was kind of how they did that. I'm not a proponent of it, but hope it wasn't 911 that they didn't test.
But to your point, we just called out several different ways you can do this when you're not necessarily even building a new application, but you're doing a migration project, right? Or I've seen operation teams apply this concept when they're trying to figure out, they've got 150 servers to upgrade and they don't know what kind of kinks they're going to run into, right? You upgrade a couple and, test that out and deciding which ones to upgrade based on a common set of, whether they're all small customers on it or they're all, it's the one big bang customer and you're going to do that one first or what have you. Those are good ways to test and work out the kinks and then move on to the next batch, right? Barb, did you have another scenario in mind when you wrote your comment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have several big projects and not to complicate too much, but we are on mainframe and we have fixed release schedules. We're not, and we have interfaces with other systems, there's a lot of constraints that we're working with. But, for example, we're changing the way provider data is going to come to us. So that hits all over the place. It's all going to have to go in at the same time because you can't have the provider data in one format in part of the system and a different format in another part of the system. So we're trying to break it down, but it even like integrated testing, you can only break it up so much. You've got to be able to take it all the way through the system. So, to be able to chunk it in small enough pieces and they're, we're trying, but it just, there has to be a certain amount of full design work. I mean, you can do a little bit of experimentation, but you have to have the big picture in mind from the beginning. In some of that, because of the way it goes through multiple, we're a downstream system to the enterprise, and anyway.
So I take it it's medical
so we struggle with that a little bit. So
you're talking about medical providers as in insurance?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, insurance or doctors?
Insurance.
Oh, okay. So maybe you could find a little provider that it's like Joe's Provider Shop, just to try as a test, the first test, and then adding more complicated provider, and that just might be the way you have to test it too. I don't know if you can do this very easily with mainframes. It's a different beast. I know that. TSO is my old friend, but it's certainly not easy to go back and redo things like that. Do you do Agile with?
We try, but like I said, we run into these things that they challenge our ability, and everybody wants to go back to, okay, now we got to design by here. We have to get all the requirements from all the systems, then we can design it, then we can, and we're a small part, of the overall enterprise. So it's not like we can, influence so much.
One of the things to be careful is I always say, defer constraining commitments until the last responsible moment. It's one of those concepts in Agile. And what it's saying is, if you have some sort of decision, it's going to make you go down a particular path, ask yourself if you can defer making that decision and thereby learn more, make a better decision. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that constrain you can be detailed design. So ask yourself, do I need to put that much detailed design in, or can I start to work on it and then come back to the detailed design and add some more, maybe my indexes and optimization of my databases IDMS or whatever you're using.
Okay, anybody else have any more questions? I think we're at the top of the hour here, so. Thanks for your time, Dr. Chuck.
Thank you.
If no one else has got any other questions, then we will
Hey,
we'll
Mark.
post this recording. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Marcy, this is Scott. I'll go ahead and drop a quick retro in the chat for folks to give some feedback for
Yeah,
tonight.
that's great.
And you all can do that. You don't have to sit on the call and do that. Hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a simple idea board. Just post what went well and what can be improved. We'd appreciate any feedback you'd give us.
Great.
Well,
So
thank
if you
you.
guys will all click on that ideas board before you close out of the meeting, you can add some feedback there. We are trying to do a better job of getting feedback after these virtual meetings. So thanks for that. I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and we will be posting the recording